really in Bible for a little bit of time. I was thinking about the adult class. Guess what? I don't care if Joe stands at the back door now. If I'm teaching, I don't care. He can just stay there, and until I'm finished teaching, he can just stand right there. See? Before, Joe would go to the door. We know we're finished. Now we're finished when we're finished. Routines. Messing up the routines. When things get messed up, they need to be fixed. Well, that's what Jesus did when things got messed up. He had it all set like he wanted. Had it all set like it was the best. But then it got messed up. But thankfully, Jesus came and made it all right again. But it's not good enough just to be all right. I have to say, that's what I want. That's what I want to have in my life. Tonight, maybe your life has been messed up. We spent a great time today at the funeral of Carolyn Middleton, learning about a life that, while messed up, was wonderful. A faithful child of God who endured the things that she did, and nothing fazed her, nothing moved her off of her faith. That's what it takes to get a life right that's messed up. A faith that says, I accept Jesus at His Word. I accept that He is my Savior, and I'm going to let Him rule my life. We've been talking about going on to perfection. Going on to perfection means developing the mentality where God has complete control of my life. As we move on down that road, some of us have been moving and we failed and we're trying to start over. Others have not begun the journey. Tonight would be a great time to start that journey, with the Lord. That's why we gather. That's why we offer this opportunity to remind ourselves again to get right with the Lord. Can we help you tonight? We're here for you as we stand and sing together.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Singing hallelujah, hallelujah, and sinners shall be given unto you. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Singing hallelujah, hallelujah. Men shall not live
All right. Oh, yeah. On the back row, friends of mine from Owingsville. You know why they're here? Because they miss me. There you go. Nobody is apoplectic. Apoplectic. Anybody? Nobody's having a heart attack because of this? We're good? Okay. I wasn't blaspheming Joe. That's exactly right. Jack said at the funeral today that somebody said the longer he's here, the more he looks like me. One of us ought to be offended. It's me. It's me. Okay. We're going to do a little something tonight that introduces to some degree what's going to happen for the next few weeks, but also it's its own lesson at the same time. It's going to include just a little bit of technology if you would like, or it can be the old-fashioned piece of paper and pencil. I don't care which. I'll explain it. Starting next week in this time period, we're going to have the shepherds of this congregation and those who have served before are going to answer questions that you have asked. Now, these questions are not, we've already had some turned in. These questions are not questions designed to say, why don't we change the carpet? Why don't we that's not what it's about. And these questions are not to be things like, explain deeply the Holy Spirit. That's not what it's about either. These questions are about, think of it from the concept of shepherding. Think about asking questions that shepherds shepherding a flock would want to do and talk about. For instance, one of the questions was turned in, what is it that makes me special before God? Now, that type of question they are going to address on these Wednesday nights. So it will deal very much with shepherding concepts that are very important for us. So what I need you to do is you can either text a question to me and I'll pass it on, or get out a piece of paper right now and a pencil and write your question and leave it with me so I can get it to them. We have extremely intelligent men who will be discussing these, but they would like to have a little more time than simply walking in the back door and being handed a question. So I want to get them to them ahead of time so that they can be addressed. So if you would tonight, think about that type of question, write it down and hand it to me or hand it to one of them, and we'll be ready. We have, I think, 3 or 4 questions to start the series. So when you think of a good one, give it to me, and we'll pass it on to them. Is that good? Everybody with me? Okay. Now, we're sort of starting with a question like that a little bit, but it serves a dual purpose. Tonight we're going to talk about the question, really it could be said this way. How is it that I can be an effective evangelist? An effective minister of God in an evangelistic setting. Here's what I know. Every Christian that I know, if someone walked up to them and said, can you tell me how I can be right with Jesus? Every Christian I know would either say, why, sure, look. Or they would say, I'm not real good at that, but I know someone who will. Come on, I'll go with you and we'll talk about it. I don't know where the verses are. I know the concept, but I don't know where the verses are. Therefore, I would love to help you. There's not a person that I know who would say, you know, I don't have time for you. I'm busy. I don't know a single person who would do that. But I also know that most people are uncomfortable with the idea of sharing the gospel with Jesus, to them, because it's tough to develop that situation where that person wants to study. So tonight we're going to talk about, in a two-layer format, we're going to talk about these concepts of teaching the gospel to those who are lost, but in a way that will help you, focus you, and give you confidence to be able to do it. And it has two levels tonight, because we're going to have a biblical level, and then we're going to have a practical level. And I will say, before he gets up here, Chris Pence this is a brainchild of his. And it's a marvelous idea. And it's one of those things, it's not just this thing, but anything that happens in the work of a local church, when it generates from the congregation outward, rather than from an elder or a preacher, it has a connection a little more. Because now someone in the pew, as it were, is sold on the concept, because this is my thing. Well, Chris has developed this entire concept. And just one thing that I will mention, it'll be a part of an opportunity for you, if you want to be involved to whatever degree. We'll be meeting on Monday nights, probably from 6:30 to 8, to talk about these things and go through a planned thing, and then it will sort of morph as it goes. But anybody would be welcome to come and be a part of this idea. So he'll explain the nuts and bolts in just a little bit. But I want us to think for just a minute in a biblical sense, the idea of the concept of evangelism. Now, there's not a single person here who hasn't been through any number of classes, any number of things related to the concept of evangelism. And we've heard it over and over and over. So probably nothing new, but maybe a reminder, maybe some challenge. First thing I want to say is, do you want your friend to be in heaven? That's the first thing I want to say. We have friends that we go out and eat with, friends that we recreate with, we go on vacations, we work with, we're in each other's homes. We share so many parts of our lives, and yet we fail to share sometimes the most important part of our lives, and that's the life of being a Christian. And like I said at the beginning, there's not a one of us who would fail or refuse to study with somebody who asks. And every one of us wants our friends to be in heaven, and every one of us has a desire for that, but not every one of us is comfortable enough to start or to initiate or to say. And therefore, we're generating some thoughts here tonight that I hope will challenge us to be evangelistic people, to use every means possible. And the key to this is becoming for yourself the resource that you want to be. We don't have to know every verse of Scripture, but we all can develop a resource within ourselves in areas and in ways that we can feel comfortable in talking to someone or with someone. Many years ago, I went through what was probably for me the greatest series of things I've ever been through in relating to evangelism. I've talked about it before, Fishers of Men. And the one thing that I took away from that has really helped me in my ministry is the idea of asking the right kinds of questions. And part of what we're going to talk about and what Chris has put together is based on a book that really dealt with that idea. It really put into practice the very thing of knowing what to say or maybe sometimes what not to say. And so asking the type of questions that get people to talking and thinking and studying and then being the resource for them that they need, but also the resource that you want to be a servant of the Lord. So we're going to talk about those things and give you an opportunity to be a part of things like that. I want to first just lay out a few things that sometimes our people, we, have been guilty of saying. Things that are dangerous if we continue to say them. We get really upset when we hear of a situation where people have abused animals by not feeding them and they're starving. And we get all bent out of shape, and we should. In fact, I don't know if you knew it or not, but many years ago, 10 or 12, in the local paper, there was an article that appeared. Michael and Rebecca Johnson arrested for cruelty to horses. I didn't know that there was another Mike and Rebecca Johnson in Richmond. And I assure you, it was another one. It wasn't us. But they also lived down the road from us. Didn't even know they were there. We get upset about that, and we should. We get even more upset when we hear about parents who abuse their children by not feeding them. Oh, and we get all bent out of shape on that, and we should. But what about when we don't feed the lost? Do we get upset about that? Well, sometimes we give some rather interesting excuses. We're not feeding them because what if a parent who wasn't feeding a child when arrested gave these kinds of excuses? Well, they didn't come to the table. The food was there, we laid it out, and they didn't come to the table, so it's their fault. And if we sit here and lay the food out, and we just say, well, the door's open. Anybody can come in who wants to come in. And somehow we think we've satisfied the statement of Jesus when he said, go and teach, because we open the door. That's an excuse. It's just not going to fly with the Lord. A parent is arrested and they say, well, I just had other things to do. What other things do you have to do besides feeding your children? Well, I just had a lot to do. I was at the store, and I have to play on this ball team, and of course I have to work. Well, what if we said the same thing spiritually? What if we said, well, we just had all these other things to do? I mean, after all, the building has to be cleaned. The yard has to be mowed. The bulbs and the lights fixtures have to be changed. And on and on and on. And we never get around to doing what Jesus said to do. What if a parent said, well, I didn't feed them because I can't stand doing that job. I can't stand it. I don't enjoy it. It's not fun. I don't like it. And what if God approaches us someday and we say, well, I can't stand it. I don't like talking to people. I don't like being involved in that kind of stuff. Well, can a person be a faithful child of God and refuse at all to share their faith with people? I'm not saying everybody has to do it the same way. I'm not saying that everybody has to get up and preach a sermon or everybody has to conduct a home Bible study in your house, but there are so many ways to spread the gospel, so much that you can do, so much that we should never be saying, I can't stand to do that. Or how about this one? Well, I never fed my children because they never asked me to. I said, if people walk up to us and said, can you tell me what I need to do to be right with the Lord? We'd jump on that just right now. But what if we said, well, Lord, nobody ever asked me. I'm a Christian. All they had to do was ask. And I'd have been glad to tell them. I wonder what the Lord would say when my excuse is, I was just waiting on them to ask. Or how about this one? Well, I didn't feed them because, I didn't really think they'd eat what I would make anyway. Oh, so you don't feed your children because you're not sure they're going to eat it. Well, sometimes we do that spiritually. We don't feed them, we don't offer to feed them because not only will they not take it, but they might get mad at us. They might be upset. They might turn away from us as friends because we dared to cross that line, suggesting even that they might be lost. Well, that doesn't mean you're suggesting that. We're saying, let's study the Bible together. But what if that attitude, I didn't think they'd take it, so I just didn't offer it? Or how about this one? No, I didn't feed my kids today. Why? Well, it just never crossed my mind. It just never crossed my mind. How many times in a day, in a week, does it cross your mind about a particular person that you know needs the Lord? And we haven't done anything to open that door. How many times? And we say, well, I just didn't think about it today. I think the Lord probably wants us to think about it. And in the same kind of way, a parent might say, well, I had every intention this morning when I got up. I had every intention of doing it, but I just never got around to it. Every one of us has better intentions in our minds than we are carrying out in our lives. I know that. Because I intend to be better every day, don't you? And tomorrow, don't you intend to be better? And next week, and next year, and in 5 years, we all intend to be better. And there are some things that we're constantly working on. There are some things that we're not constantly working on, we're just putting it off, and putting it off, and putting it off. And if I never get around to it, I wonder if the Lord will hold me responsible. The final one that I thought of was this. I didn't feed them because I didn't want them to feel obligated that they had to eat. Well, your children need to eat. The children, and we all know, if they get a choice between broccoli and candy, I pretty well know what they're going to do. And so the idea of saying, well, I didn't want them to feel obligated to eat, so I just didn't do it. I don't want them to feel obligated to me to think that I'm right and they're wrong. I don't want them to feel obligated in any way. The point is not about right and wrong. The point is about we are children of God. And we have a message and an opportunity. And trying to help us get that message available to people who need it. That's the challenge that we're working on. And that's the idea that will be here in this foundational material that Chris is going to share in just a few minutes about how we can do that in a very practical way. A very practical way to learn, to do better, and to be better. So, the negative side is we've got all these excuses. Well, I want to encourage us on the other side. I want to encourage us to learn how to fish. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn how to fish. Now, I have to tell you, if I was going to learn to fish, I'd go get Harold or I'd get Titus or Cecil or, some of these people because they know what they're doing. I don't want to learn to fish, so I'm not going to go. But I don't want to fish that way. But I tell you this, I want us to learn to fish as Jesus said to his disciples, you come follow me, and I'll make you to become fishers of men. That's what I want us to learn to do. In a very healthy way, in a very natural way, in a very, over time, non-intimidating way. The thing that intimidates us is not knowing where to begin and how to start, not feeling that we could answer every question that might come up. That's where our intimidation comes. But as we learn to fish, let me give you 4 thoughts. 1, we have to let go of the bait. Put the bait out there. There's a way to be in that. There's a way to bait the situation that we are in, to create an environment where that becomes something that people enjoy doing or want to do. There's a way to do it. It might be simply giving them some material that they can read on their own. That's letting go of the bait. Number 2, remember, when we're fishing, we don't change the bait. We're not going to change the bait. We can't say that this is what the Lord wants, but I want this. We have a lot of people fishing today, spiritually, but they've changed the bait. And they have changed the bait to make it appealing and more enjoyable. And therefore, they're missing the real point, which is truth. We have to keep with the bait. We have the Word of God. That's what we have to stick with. And we're not going to change that. And I don't ever want to be guilty of having softened God's message for the purpose of getting someone. Oh, I believe in using methodologies really well, any kinds of things, but man, we don't change the bait. Number 3, when we're talking about it, I don't want to bait and switch either. I don't want to do that. Sometimes, what a bait and switch is. You're invited in because of this, and once you're in, oh, wait a minute, this is what we're going to do. That's not fair, that's not good, that's not right. And so, some people are really open and kind and good and inviting, and then once they get in, they just hammer them. We're not going to do that. We want to be real people. We want to be every day, every life. People enjoy us, appreciate us. We appreciate them. And we're not going to do the bait and switch. So instead, we want to bait the hook and get to work. That's what we want to do. Not everybody can be involved in something like this. I understand that. Not everybody can be involved in the same way. But every one of us can be better prepared for those times when those situations present themselves to be able to share the gospel with someone. And so in a non-threatening, encouraging, and I think unique way, we're going to offer an opportunity for us to get together. As many as will come, we'll find room to sit and study. And what will end up happening, I think, is a cadre of individuals who feel very confident and are ready. And we can begin being very intentional in our evangelistic outreach in a way that maybe we've not ever done before. And I appreciate Chris catching the spirit of that and being enthused by it, built around a book that is really good. So what we're going to do is he's going to do a PowerPoint presentation about that, and then I'm going to get up here and we're just going to, whatever time we have left until Joe goes to the door, we're going to talk about, we just have some questions. Talk to me. Let's talk about the concept that we're dealing with, okay?
Good evening. See if I can get this on there just right. All right. I believe Scripture teaches somewhere about giving, and it says something to the effect of, don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. We have a little case of that tonight because you're going to hear a little repetitive action here. On Sunday, Mike challenged us to exercise spiritually. Both sermons were geared towards teaching us how to exercise our faith spiritually. He also mentioned that this is a pivotal time in our history of this congregation. And I believe that this program that we're going to introduce is going to be something that is pivotal. We're going to introduce this program, and it is a tangible way, an intentional way that we can exercise spiritually. Mike also challenged us to look for metaphors and analogies in our daily lives to put spiritual things in physical applications. And Mike has already covered what I was going to cover, but we're going to still do it anyways. We're going to cover not a new concept at all, because Jesus, as Mike mentioned and said, it covers this. Evangelism is a lot like fishing. Fishing is, I'm going to take this down a different concept than even what probably Jesus had in mind, but we're going to cover it anyways. Over the last year or so, I've had a renewed interest in fishing. Many years ago, me and my dad used to go fishing all the time as I was growing up, but as I got older, got interested in other things, my interest in fishing decreased. But last year when Cody turned 6, I took him fishing for the first time on his birthday, and he loved it. He had the best time. So in that, he wanted to go on a boat, though. That was the big thing that disappointed him. He wanted to go on a boat. So I did some research, found a lot of options from kayaks, everything, but I ended up buying an inflatable boat, and we got on the water. So a couple months later, we found out that we could go on the boat, and since then we've actually modified it. We have a hardwood floor on it. We have boxes we can sit on, so we've made it really nice for the price that we've paid for it. But in doing so, on a boat, you don't feel obligated to use worms and a bobber, things like that are traditional ways of fishing, which is what I've done all my life. Last year, since we were on the boat, I decided, you know what, I'm going to try a lure for the first time in a long time. I've tried a lot of times growing up and never could catch a fish on a lure. But last year, for the first time, I threw the lure out there, and all of a sudden, there's a fish on the end of it. Couldn't believe it. So caught a nice sized bass and brought it in, and it was so much fun, we were hooked. So after some convincing with my dad, I got him on the boat. He was not wild about the inflatable nature of the boat, but managed to get him on it finally, and now he's somewhat comfortable with it. But he finally started using lures too, and we were catching fish. So one of the interesting things is there are so many different lures. As our interest has grown, we've gone to school. And as most modern people today, we've gone to school on YouTube. So we've watched video after video after video of fishing videos teaching us how to fish. So you notice here on the screen we have crankbaits, buzzbaits, jigs. All of these different lures are used in different scenarios. And they usually work better in certain seasons. So you might use one in spring, you might use one in summer, and some of them are used all year round. It just depends. So if we apply this to a spiritual concept, some people may encounter the gospel and have a hunger for it. And it comes across their path and they strike without hesitation because they know it's the right season of their life and the right presentation so that they will react to the gospel in that time. So like this fish we just saw, it was right there, it wanted it, it ate it. This fish, on the other hand, it's different. The season of life may not be just right. The presentation might not be right. Each of these baits that I showed you a minute ago have different colors they come in, have different sizes. You have to have the right rod and reel. You have to have all the right things. But these baits will eventually, hopefully, come across the right fish at the right time and cause the right reaction. So this video shows you several different baits being thrown at this particular fish, but it's not until it finds the right one that it reacts. So Mike talked about not changing the bait, and he's absolutely right about that concept because we don't want to change the truth. The truth is what the bait is. But we can package the truth in different forms. So that's another concept we're going to look at here in just a minute. As a congregation, when we evangelize together, it's much like throwing a net. So when we do individual studies, things like that, it's like fishing with your line, your rod and reel, things like that. But when we do it as a congregation, it's like throwing that net out here. This is video footage from when I was in Guyana with David Pear. And we got to film a video of these guys fishing with a net. And it was fascinating to watch because it really felt like the old days, like it was in Jesus' time. And they actually caught quite a few fish, which actually ended up being breakfast the next morning. So what we want to present tonight is a concept of primary evangelism versus secondary evangelism. We do all of the things on this screen. We do the internet outreach, radio programs, we do the teddy bear program, all these things. But there's a difference between secondary evangelism and primary evangelism. With secondary evangelism, these programs are geared towards benevolence, things like that first. It's an outreach, but we are not necessarily trying to get someone to come to Christ through these things. We hope that's a secondary consequence of it, but that's not the main goal. With our primary evangelism, though, this is the goal. We are trying to reach you and get you to a point where you have reached salvation. This is the book that Mike was alluding to. It's called Muscle and a Shovel. And I've had it sitting around my house for, a year or two and never touched it. A few, months now, Lee decided to read it on one day when she was teaching school to the kids, and she was they were doing their own tasks, so she read the whole thing in one day. It took me 3 or 4 days, but if you've never read the book, it is a story written by Michael Shank, and he tells of his conversion to, he was raised a Baptist, and he encountered a man named Randall at work, which Randall is not actually his real name. It's a pseudonym that was given to the guy because Michael did not, and I'm sure Randall did not want Randall to get the glory for what happened. It was meant to be a placeholder name so that you could understand who this person was. And throughout the book, Randall just casually at work throws out different questions to Michael and provokes him to think about different things in his life, about the way he was raised, about different beliefs he's had, and really provokes him to come to the gospel. And it took several months for him to react, but once he did, he was hooked. We want to present the concept of what we're going to call Team Randall. The name's a little hokey, get that, but if you've read the book, it makes sense. It also comes with an analogy, It's going to mean reaching a nation desiring a living Lord. So what we're wanting to do with this team is it's a working group. It's meant to be a group that gets together and brainstorms plans and executes ideas related to evangelism. So we want to find all sorts of ways that we can think about ways to evangelize. It doesn't have to be talking to somebody. It can be as simple as wearing a shirt or having a bumper sticker. There are many ways we can get the word out without speaking a word. It's also going to be a study group that focuses on gaining knowledge and carrying out effective evangelism. And it's going to be a prayer group that will pray for our community in evangelism efforts. It's also going to be a group that will have people that we can call on to study with people who want to do individual studies if somebody's not available to do that. One of our ideas is to do this t-shirt campaign. It lays out the steps of salvation, emphasizing plus baptism, because that is where many other organizations disagree with us, is about baptism. So on the back it talks about different scriptures relating to baptism and why we believe the way we do. This is just a concept. This is not by any means a shirt that we're actually doing just yet, but it's just meant to be an idea, a representation of what we could do. Other ideas we have are bumper stickers, renting a billboard, putting a message out there where people can go to maybe a website and get questions answered that they have. So advertising local digital and print media, setting up a booth at like an Eastern game, something as simple as just standing there with some signs maybe next to the booth and letting people come talk to us. We don't need to necessarily go pursue other people. If we let people come to us, then it makes the conversation a little easier because we know right away you're interested. So I've never been a big fan of door knocking, and that's one of the reasons why, because I hate when people knock on my door. But with this way, we can have people come to us and then ask their questions. We also talked about maybe doing care packages for the homeless that contain other information. So who is this group for? It's really for everybody. When we're on our boat, if we came in contact with somebody who is on another boat and they needed help, what would we do? We'd throw them a life preserver. And that's exactly what evangelism is. It's throwing somebody a life preserver. So this idea has been born out of a Bible study that Mike and Michael McGaffey have done with me for years. We've been studying Revelation, haven't really made much progress, but so we want to use that time that we're doing more effectively, and this is the idea. So like Mike said, we're going to probably meet on Mondays at 6:30 to 8, and our goal is simply to study, to pray, and to learn how to be effective evangelists.
Let me say that, number one, I really appreciate Chris. He qualifies as one of those hard nuts to crack. That's what he was. And of course, Lee was studying with him for a long time. And he and I got into some studies. And Chris is where he is because he was introduced and he thought and he studied and he's there. And I'm going to lay the challenge out even more because he started this, and I'm going to challenge it even more. He intends, and apparently he's got a lot of it done, to write a book on baptism from a perspective that he came from not understanding or accepting it, not even knowing about it, never even heard the idea, to now an advocate of incredible ability. So I'm putting that out in public, so you now have to write the book because everybody's going to ask you for it. So there you go. So your table has been loaded now. So, and I'm looking forward to it because I've spent a lot of time with him, and I really appreciate where he is spiritually. Now, if you can't come every time, fine. Come when you can. One of us will be there all the time, hopefully you and all of us, to guide and to lead and to study. We have, there is a workbook that is connected with this book, Muscle and Shovel, and we're going to go through it. There is a second book that has been written, and then his wife wrote a third book, apparently. I haven't read that one yet. I will say this about Muscle and Shovel. It is a tough book for someone who is trying to find a way not to believe, because it's a sort of an in-your-face thing. It scared me a little bit thinking about, what if I were doing that? I don't know if I could get away with it. But you have to remember, in this book, they had a relationship. They were friends already, and he could build on that. But doing this to a complete stranger, it could catch you a little bit. But it's a phenomenal book. It's one of the most popular books in our brotherhood for a while. Many, many hundreds, thousands of copies that have been done. And if you haven't read it, I would suggest you read it. And we're going to go through that and do those kinds of things. So we'll start. I don't know if we're going to start next Monday or not. We're going to start very soon as we get some details and things worked out and what we're going to do. And we'll certainly let you know about that. And so I think it can be, if nothing else, I think it will be extremely helpful just to focus our minds on the concept and be thinking about it, to have the mentality going on. There's something valuable, I think, in a congregation when everybody knows that there's this one thing that's always happening, and you can just know it. It's happening. And that's what it's going to be. And so if you're involved in the class, fine. If not, you can remember it in prayer, or you can see, you'll notice people who will come, who've been studied with and who are going to come and be a part. The follow-up to that is going to be interesting too, because we'll need people to study with people once they've obeyed the gospel. We're not going to drop them. Baptism is not the place where you end, it's the place where you begin. And so we have to continue with the teaching on a continual basis. So there are a lot of things like that. And I want you to know that we want to be involved in this and want to make it work, and we'd love to have you come and be a part of it. Is there anything that pops in your mind as a question or a statement or an opinion, a helpful suggestion, any of those kinds of things, word of encouragement that might help us as we move forward? Any thoughts? We just laid it all out there. Go ahead.
Coming from Goshen, we did a huge study with Muscle and the Shovel as a congregation, and then the elders had bought the books, and we were to pass them out to our friends. That book was amazing. The workbook, we tried to go through it as a congregation after we read the book. It's confusing.
Is it? Okay. I haven't seen one yet, so.
Yeah, it's very confusing, and it doesn't really go along with the book very well. So, and then we did the Broken Shovel, the second book.
Yes.
We did that one. That was not recommended to give to anybody that wasn't a Christian.
Right.
Because it's about how he.
Yeah, he fell away.
I haven't read his wife's book. I didn't even know she made one. But we gave it to some really good friends of ours who they went to like a Grace Community Church where they did tithing and all that stuff. And right before we got ready to move, they had read the book. They quit going there. We not begged them, but we told them, go see, because they came to church with us a couple times. Go see the preacher and go talk to the preacher there. They haven't done it yet, which kind of breaks my heart, but because they were really shocked at what they learned in that book.
Well, the seed was planted, and that's the key. Seed was planted. It sprouts in its time.
And then the other thing was, I was doing a lot of research because you asked me to get the homeless bags around.
Right.
Everything I've read suggests that you don't put church literature in the bags, that you're to put like shelter literature or places where they can go to get help.
Interesting.
But they say they throw the religious literature away. When we did it in Goshen, they got a Muscle and the Shovel book, they got a Bible, and they got some tracts. I don't know if they ever threw them away or not. You don't know.
Right.
They might read them, they might not. So, but the biggest suggestion was don't put your literature in there. So, that's something to think about.
I actually forgot to tell Chris and Mike that we've been working with us that you were going to do some investigating on that. The idea had come up earlier through some
One, I don't even know what family it was, they never told me, but a family said that they were wanting to do something with their kids to be able to say when there's a homeless person and they're standing there looking for money or something to eat, and here's a bag, and we got them prepared, and we just hand it to them. And I thought, I love the idea. And so I've had that idea in my head for a while, and then this came up, and then Cindy said that they used to do it. And so she's going to investigate some things on that and make that a part. And as he put up there the primary and secondary, that's the point about evangelism. We need to do both. We need to do primary and secondary. And the primary stuff is really what this class is, but it will also feed into the secondary. And anytime I've noticed, in fact, I was telling Tim the other day, I remember yesterday, at the funeral, wasn't visitation, our track rack out there toward the door is empty because somebody came in here and took them. Well, those thieves. What do they mean? Come here and steal our stuff. Well, that's what we want, right? And what now? Oh, they did ask permission? Okay, they didn't steal? Okay. Well, the thing is, we keep putting it out there, and like you said, at least the seed was sown. Who knows what will happen in the future? You can do the same thing. Be involved in handing stuff out. Just let people read. That's a great thing to do. And so this will be designed more for people who have a real interest in a depth of study, a broad study, creating your own resource for yourself. That's what this will be. But every one of us can be involved in those secondary things. Our food baskets is a great secondary work. The Colonel's thing is a great secondary, also in primary. So, any other thoughts, questions, advice? Jason?
I was just going to say, a good friend of mine that I grew up with in the church, she still attends the church where my mom and dad go, where we grew up. Her and her kids, and she's got some other people involved, do a program like that where they always have bags.
Oh.
Her sons are just like, anytime they see anybody, she's done a great job raising them. They always have bags ready for homeless with specific things in them to give to them, and they're always doing stuff like that. So I can check with her and get some ideas.
You guys need to connect.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna let her point this thing so she can run and yeah. I like it. Outstanding. See, more info, more resource. Carol? Yeah. Right.
I thought it'd be nice to let the kids get involved.
Kids involved too. There you go.
Put a basket in the room, and give them a list, and
Sure.
have a video and let the kids, you know.
If this is something that really inspires you, you might want to talk with her and you all get together and talk about it. Keep going.
Many of them were homeschool parents and
Right.
brought their children, and they were helping too, all the way around the room. But anything that's, like cheese crackers, those will only last so long. So we didn't go too far out.
Right.
We would just get together and do it again. And we each then took home baggies, the bags, and kept them in our cars.
Yep.
You know, one or two of them, knowing that we would go by an area, we had something to hand out instead of.
I like it. I like it. See, these are great suggestions and more. Again, the consciousness, being conscious of this idea gets our minds moving and rolling and brainstorming. And we find people who have interest in certain things and in certain ways. And so now the ones of you who've been talking, y'all get together, talk about that idea, and we can present it and work it through this group or work it through any other number of groups. I know that we have done a lot through the years in evangelism, and I think we've done well. We have a lot of good track record. We don't ever want to sit on our laurels. We don't ever want to get content. We're constantly wanting to renew our minds about the main point as to why we're here. We're here to save souls, whether those who have never come to know Jesus or those of us who are and are trying to continue to be. We're in that business, and let's not get complacent. We remind ourselves that these are the people that we need to be. If you have thoughts, ideas, helpful suggestions in those ways, we'll be getting information to you about when we're meeting and various things that are going on, but we really would appreciate any help in that area. Back to the other, I really would appreciate getting some questions from you, more questions that our shepherds can answer over the next quarter. We're going to be in here together because of the reconstruction and delaying having another class for adults until the next quarter. So we'll all be in here for this whole quarter. All right?
Do a show of hands and see who would like to purchase a book and order some cases. And
Yes, we're going to do that. Yeah. If you, how many, first of all, how many of you have read Muscle and Shovel? How many of you have read? Quite a few. Extremely good. Okay. All right. If you would be interested in getting one, I'll find out what we can get on a bulk rate, and I'll put it out there, and you can sign up and get one. It's an easy read, good read. You'll enjoy it, I think. All right. Good to see you. I like this. I like this new way of doing things. I'm on board. Didn't upset me a bit.